But you know, the events of this weekend really should bring some real sobriety to this nation. Because what we have to recognize is if we don't fight the global jihadist movement over there in the Middle East, we will be fighting them here in the streets of our nation.
That's right.
And we have to recognize that this is a serious problem. You know, a lot of Americans really think back to 2003, and they remember Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda, and they said, we never should have gone in there and destabilized it, and they may be right about that. We certainly shouldn't have left after we got there, that's for sure. But here's the problem. Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda at that time was not an existential threat to us.
Yeah, that means
the global jihad movement is an existential threat. They want to destroy us and everything that has to do with us. They want to destroy Israel. And we have two choices. We can sit around and act like they are the JV and that they are not going to do anything and that they're only significant over there. Or we can use every resource available to us to destroy them first. And I will go with the latter. Because if we truly care about the people of our nation, and you know, my entire professional career revolved around taking care of children and giving them longevity and giving them quality of life. And if we really care about what's going to happen to them, then we need to act like it. We need to be creating a safe environment for them.
That's right.
And certainly, you think about things like the Iranian nuclear deal. I mean, give me a break. Why would we just be pushing off for 8 or 10 years?
Yes.
You know, letting them have a weapon and letting them have intercontinental ballistic missiles and letting them have the mechanism to destroy our children. Does that make any sense? You know, why in the world would we do that? I believe a third grader could have negotiated a better deal than that, quite frankly. And it was portrayed as either we make this deal or we go to war. But of course we had another very good option, and that is to tighten the sanctions, which brought them to the table in the first place. And we have to learn how to be a little more creative. We need to look at the things that are working. You look at last week, and Sinjar, we were able to get that back. Why? Because they utilized a smart strategy. They cut off the supplies so that they could control everything that was coming in there. They supported the Kurds both on the ground with special ops and in the air, and that was a winning formula. And that's the same kind of thing that can be applied to other places. And we need to start looking at how we do that. It doesn't necessarily mean we have to put 100,000 of our troops on the ground. It means we need to work very smart with what we have. And as we begin to win, what will happen is others will want to join us rather than joining the jihadist movement. And that's the way you do it. You have to fight both the psychological and the physical war in order to be able to do it. But you know, people ask me all the time, after a wonderful medical career, why would you want to get into the world of politics? And I frequently ask myself that too. I mean, it is a pretty nasty world, there's no question about it, but I'll tell you why. Again, it's because America is worth saving. And you look at all of those people. You look at all of our predecessors and what they were willing to do, what they were willing to give up. including their very lives, so that we could be safe and so that we could be prosperous. And I should tell you right off the bat something about myself. I am not politically correct. Therefore, it is possible that I might offend someone. It would not be done on purpose, okay? But I do not spend every waking hour trying to figure out whether I can say this or that because somebody might be offended. And we need to stop that silliness, so we need to start getting a thicker skin.
That's right.
You know, there were a lot of people who gave everything they could so that we could have freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And we are going to have to stand up solidly and resist the forces of division and those people who try to control what we can say and how we can act. You look at what was going on in some of these universities this week. These are supposed to be bastions of intellect and enlightenment, and instead they're tolerating kids going around bullying people, saying that you can only say what I want you to say, and if you don't say that, you have to resign, you have to quit, we can spit on you, we can push you around. Folks, I gotta tell you, that if we tolerate that, that's the beginning of fascism in our country. We cannot allow that to happen. And here's what we must keep in mind about the secular progressive movement, who claim to be the most wonderful people in the world, looking out for everybody's rights. Yeah, but they only look out for your rights if you agree with them. And you know what? They don't even care if you don't agree with them, as long as you sit down and shut your mouth and let them drive. And I'm telling you, it's time for us to stand up and open our mouths and make sure that we make our will known. This country is the most wonderful country I've ever been. I've been to 57 countries. Not 57 states, 57 countries. And I gotta tell you, I am always thrilled to get back here. We have everything here. And there's so many people who like to badmouth our country and say that we're responsible for all the ills of the world. But have you ever noticed how many people are trying to get in here? Not many people are trying to get out. Think about that.
That's right.
And it remains for so many people the land of dreams. And it was certainly that for me as a youngster. Even though we grew up in poverty, I still could dream. And I used to see those stories about doctors. And I loved anything that had to do with being a doctor. I even liked going to the doctor's office as a kid. And I would gladly sacrifice a shot just to smell those alcohol swabs. But you know, I listened to the stories, particularly in church, about missionary doctors. They seem so wonderful. Personal sacrifice going all over the globe, bringing not only physical but mental and spiritual healing to people. And they seem like the most noble people on earth. And I decided when I was 8 years old that I would be a missionary doctor. And that was my dream until I was 13. At which time, having grown up in dire poverty, I decided I'd rather be rich. So at that point, missionary doctor was out and psychiatrist was in. Now, I didn't know any psychiatrists, but on TV they seem like rich people, you know. They drove Jaguars and lived in mansions and had these big plush offices, and all they had to do is talk to crazy people all day. But it seemed like I was doing that anyway, so I said, this is going to work out extremely well. But you know, later on, I started, when I was in medical school, I believe that God gives everybody special gifts and talents. And I said, what are your special gifts and talents? And I started analyzing my life, and I realized I had a lot of eye-hand coordination, the ability to think in 3 dimensions. I was a very careful person. I never knocked things over and said, oops. Which is a good characteristic for a brain surgeon.
Right.
And I love to dissect things. And I put that all together and I said, you would be a terrific neurosurgeon. At that time, there had only been 8 black neurosurgeons in the world. And a lot of people thought that was a strange thing for me to do. But I have to tell you a secret. When God gives you the talent to do something, He doesn't care what color you are.
That's right. Yes.
You know, I personally believe that our diversity is a gift from God.
Yes.
Because can you imagine what the world would be like if everybody looked exactly like you? Think about it. In some cases, it'd be a national disaster. So I think it is wonderful that we have variety. And, you know, we need to stop listening to the purveyors of division in our country.
That's right.
Because, you know, this is the United States of America, not the divided states of America. We have all these people going around trying to convince women that there's a war on women going on in this country. There is no war on women. There is a war on little babies developing inside of them.
Yes!
And then we have those who want you to believe that there's a race war going on. Anytime that there's a conflict between people of 2 different races, it's chalked up to racism. Well, you know, when you put people together, there's going to be conflicts. And, you know, it's not always a racial thing. It's a people thing. People have conflicts with each other.
Yes.
But one of the things that I think is going to be so crucial for us to do to get over some of the divisiveness that people are able to capitalize upon and create divisions is we need to understand that we're all in the same boat. And if part of the boat goes down, the rest of it's going down too. And in this country, we have 330 million people. We're competing with China and India and places that have over 1 billion people. That means we need to develop all of our people. It's unacceptable that 20% of people who enter high school in our country do not graduate.
That's right.
Particularly in the technological age in which we live. And we must recognize that for every one of those young people that we can keep from going down that path of self-destruction, that's one less person that we have to be afraid of or protect our family from.
That's right.
One less person that we have to pay for in the penal system.
Yes.
Or the welfare system.
Yes.
One more tax-paying, productive member of society
Yes.
who may discover a new energy source or the cure for cancer.
Yes.
We can't throw away any of our people. We need every single
That's right.
one.
That's right.
And that's how we're going to have to begin to think in terms of our policies.
That's right.
And then we have those who want you to believe that there's income wars, class warfare. They're always stoking up class warfare. Particularly Saul Alinsky, who wrote the book Rules for Radicals. If you want some interesting reading, I recommend you read that book because it tells you the formula for turning your society from the free society that we have to their so-called utopian society, which is socialism, basically. And it's interesting when you look at the dedication page of that book, it is dedicated to Lucifer, the original radical who gained his own kingdom. So that should give you some idea of what we're dealing with. And if you read that book and you turn those pages, you will recognize much of what is going on in our country right now. And we have to make sure that we understand who the enemy is, what the opposition is, the people who are trying to fundamentally change this country into something else because they think it's better. Their utopia where the government knows best and is able to take care of you from cradle to grave. It all sounds good to certain people, but the problem is all of those societies end up looking the same way, with a small group of elites at the top controlling everything, a vastly decreased middle class, and a vastly expanded dependent class. And that's exactly the direction that we're going in, and exactly why we must stop it. America is a can-do nation, not a what can you do for me nation. That's the difference. But one of the areas that we must once again begin to concentrate on is the field of education. It made such a difference for me. I was a horrible student. Probably one of the worst students you ever saw. I thought I was stupid. Everybody else thought I was stupid, except my mother.
Yeah.
She was the only one who didn't think I was stupid. And even she had her doubts sometimes, but because I just really created problems since I didn't think I was smart. But she did something that was so important. She didn't have much in the way of education, but she believed in God.
That's right.
And she prayed, and she asked God to give her the wisdom to know what to do to get her sons to achieve and to be able to control their own lives. And you see, that's the wonderful thing about God. You don't have to have a PhD to talk to him. You just have to have faith. And she had faith. And God opened her eyes and she looked around her and she saw the homes that she cleaned, that those people didn't spend all day looking at television. They seemed to read a lot of books. So she came home one day and turned off the TV and said, you guys can only watch 2 or 3 TV programs during the week. Now we really, if we'd been around today, we would have called Protective Services. And they probably would have put her in jail, But in those days, you had to do what your parents told you. There was no social psychologist saying let the kid express themselves. So, at any rate, to add insult to injury, she said we had to read 2 books apiece from the Detroit Public Libraries every week and submit to her written book reports, which she couldn't read, but we didn't know that. And she would put little check marks and highlights. And, I didn't like it very much, but a funny thing happened as I started reading those books. I was looking at words all the time, so I learned how to spell. I wasn't the first one to sit down in the spelling bee. And then I had to put those words together, so I learned grammar and syntax. And then I had to take those sentences and make them the concepts, so you learn to use your imagination and to become a creative person, and my grades just zoomed. And in the space of a year and a half, I went from the bottom of the class to the top of the class, much to the consternation of all those people who used to tease me, call me names. And the same students who used to laugh at me and call me names in the 5th grade were coming to me in the 7th grade saying, Benny, how do you work this problem? And I'd say, sit at my feet, youngster, while I instruct you. I was perhaps a little obnoxious, but you know what? When you think about the human brain, I mean, it is the most fabulous organ system in the universe. And we have one. If you have a normal brain, there are very few things that you can't do if you put your mind to it. Case in point. How many people here remember your birthday? Let me just see your hand. Okay, it's almost unanimous. And almost instantly. But what did your brain have to do for you to respond to that question? First of all, the sound waves have to leave my lips, travel through the air, enter your external auditory meatus, travel down to your tympanic membrane, set up a vibratory force, which travel across the oscillus of your middle ear to the oval and round middle center for a vibratory force in the endolimb, which mechanically distorted the microcilia, converting mechanical energy to electrical energy, which travel across the cochlear nerve to the cochlear nucleus at the pontomedullary junction, from there to the superior olivary nucleus, descending bilaterally up the brainstem to the lamina meniscus and inferior colliculus, medial geniculate nuclei, to the spinal radiation, and I was just getting started. But see if you can get one of those rap singers to do that. But if you can do all of this and you barely even have to think about it,
Right.
what is the human brain capable of
Think.
when you actually put your mind to doing something?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you something. We were made in the image of God.
Yes.
And God is no God.
Yes.
And He gave us these sophisticated brains with these big frontal lobes for a reason. Frontal lobe is where you engage in rational thought processing. We're the creatures that have the ability to extract information from the past and the present, integrate it into a plan, and project it into the future, which means we can plan and strategize, which means we don't have to be victims and we don't have to just react. If you look at animals, the parts of the brain that deal with just reaction, brain stem and midbrain, are much better developed, and the frontal lobes are not well developed. Speaking, animals are very good at reacting to things. The problem is that a lot of people act like animals, and they just react to things rather than using those frontal lobes to create what needs to be done. And this is what we're going to have to do now in order to extract ourselves from the difficulties that we're in right now. For instance, look at our national debt. $18.5 trillion. Thomas Jefferson said it's immoral to pass debt to the next generation. If we could bring him forward to today, he would stroke out immediately. He wouldn't even be able to fathom what we are doing to the next generation. If you tried to pay $18.5 trillion off at $10 million a day, it would take you more than 5,000 years. And this is a problem. And it's actually worse than that, because when you look at all the unfunded liabilities versus the amount of money that we have coming in, you're talking about a fiscal gap of over $200 trillion. And it is those kinds of debt and the policies that are destroying the economy and destroying the future for those who are coming behind us. But that's why we have these brains, so we can figure out how to get it moving again. Dollars overseas. We can bring that money back. We have the highest corporate tax rates in the developed world. That's why it's not coming back. 6-month hiatus in the corporate tax rate to let that money be brought back, with the only stipulation being that 10% of it has to be used in enterprise zones and to create jobs for people who are on welfare and unemployed. You want to talk about a stimulus? That would be the biggest stimulus since FDR's New Deal, and it wouldn't cost the taxpayers 1 penny. That's low-hanging fruit. That's the kind of thing that we need to do. But here's the good thing about that. It starts business, industry, thinking once again about what they used to do.
Businesses going
and that
to China.
is to invest
You need to bring them back
in the
from China
communities
so our people
around
can have
them.
jobs. That's what he's talking
Because
about.
you see, when we, the private sector, business, industry, academia, Wall Street, churches, community groups, when we invest in our fellow citizens, we do it in a way that's effective, that brings people out of poverty. When the government does it, they do it in a way that keeps people dependent upon them.
That's right.
And this is what we don't want. You know, so many people have said that, well, Carson was poor and, you know, he must have had some government assistance, and now he wants to take away all of the programs from everybody. That's a bunch of crap. You know, that's stuff that the left wing loves to you know, put that kind of propaganda out because they don't want their base to listen to what you're really saying. But the kind of thing that I am saying is I want to create a ladder of opportunity that allows people to climb up from a state of dependency and become part of the fabric of success in America. That's what America is all about. And every one of you can play a role in helping to restore this nation. I want you to recognize what we're up against here. Let me just give you an example. If I were in charge of this nation and I wanted to destroy it, let me tell you what I would do. I would drive wedges between all the people. I would create so much friction and so much hatred. I would have the Democrats hating the Republicans and the Republicans hating the Democrats. I would want nobody to talk to each other. And I would set up all kinds of barriers between people. And then I would destabilize the financial foundation by driving the debt to unsustainable levels. I would be inviting people in here from other countries, giving them all kinds of benefits. I'd be trying to get the people in this country on welfare, on food stamps, on everything I could get them on. I'd be giving them free phones. I'd be telling people that you can go to college for free. And I would just drive that thing to unsustainable levels. And then I would destroy the military. And I would destroy the morale. I would have the smallest Navy since 1917, the smallest Air Force since 1940. I would have a sequester that cut the heart personnel out. Lieutenant colonels and majors, captains, sending them letters saying you need not reapply. The morale would be so low that generals would be retiring early. I would be telling the veterans how wonderful they are, but it would do nothing to improve the situation for them, so that 22 a day would be committing suicide. I would do nothing to strengthen and harden our electrical grid, which leaves us extremely vulnerable to all kinds of attacks. And these are the things that I would do. Any resemblance to what's going on, I'm sure, is coincidental. Okay? That we're up against. Here's what you can do. In 2012, 93 million Americans who could have voted did not vote. 25 to 30 million evangelicals who could have voted did not vote. You know some of those people. I hope none of you are some of those people. They're in your sphere of influence. You need to talk to them. Talk to Uncle Joe who doesn't like to do anything except drink all the day long, and tell him that if he doesn't get his butt in gear and get out there and vote, there may be no beer.
That's right.
And go and see your grandmother who's in a convalescent center, who can't get out to vote. Make sure she has an absentee ballot. And you go and you help her fill it out if you need to do that. If everybody here gets 3 people who didn't vote before to vote this time, we will be able to do what was designed for this country. And that was for the people to determine the direction of the country. This country is of, for, and by the people. The government is there just to facilitate. And you know, it was Thomas Jefferson who I think said it best. He said the people of America would become less vigilant. They would stop paying attention to what was going on. And as a result of that, the government would grow and infiltrate and dominate. But he said just before we turned into something else, the people of America would recognize what was going on, would rise up and take control. Now is the time to do that. Thank you.